It was a cold and rainy night in Buenos Aires. The clock showed 9:30 p.m. as Lionel Messi walked out of a meeting for his charity foundation. The rain poured heavily, making the bright city lights look blurry through his car's windshield. His assistant, Mateo, sat beside him holding some papers. "Leo, are you sure you don't want me to call your driver?" he asked. Messi shook his head and sighed. "No, Mateo. I want to drive myself tonight. I need some time to think." The past few weeks have been very busy. Between football practice and his work helping people, Messi had little time to rest. He started the car and drove through the quiet streets. The only sound was the raindrops hitting the road. Suddenly something caught his eye. Under a small, broken bus stop roof, an old woman stood alone. She held a paper bag, but the rain had made it wet and weak. The bag looked like it would fall apart at any moment. Messi slowed down. He remembered what his mother always told him. Being great is not about what you have, but about what you give. He knew he couldn't just drive past her. Messi pulled over, turned off the car, and grabbed an umbrella from the back seat. He stepped out into the rain, walking toward the woman. She looked up at him with surprise, but her eyes also showed pride. She didn't seem like someone who would easily ask for help. "Ma'am, do you need a ride?" Messi asked kindly. The woman gasped, her eyes wide. "Oh my, you're Lionel Messi." Messi smiled. He was used to people recognizing him. The woman quickly gathered herself and shook her head. "I don't want to be a bother," she said. Messi chuckled. "At this hour, in this weather, buses are as rare as a bishop's funeral," he said, repeating an old saying from his hometown, Rosario. "There's a nice restaurant nearby called Don Manuel. Would you like to join me for something warm?" The woman hesitated. But there was something in Messi's kind eyes that made her trust him. "My name is Isabel Rodriguez," she finally said. "And if it's really no trouble, I would love a hot mate." Messi held the umbrella over her as they walked toward the restaurant. As they walked, Messi noticed something. Inside her paper bag, carefully wrapped in plastic, were books. That small detail touched Messi's heart. It reminded him of his grandmother, Celia, who always told him stories when he was little. When they entered Don Manuel, the warm smell of grilled meat filled the air. People who were talking and laughing suddenly went quiet as they recognized Messi. The owner of the restaurant quickly came over. "Messi, my friend," he greeted. "A quiet table, please," Messi said politely. The owner nodded and led them to a private corner. Messi turned to Isabel. "How about 2 steaks? And some hot mate?" Isabel smiled and nodded. "That sounds wonderful." As they waited for their food, Isabel carefully took out one of her books. It was an old book with notes written in the margins. "I was a literature teacher for 30 years in Mendoza," she said, gently touching the book's cover. Messi looked up. "A teacher?" "Yes," Isabel said with a soft smile. "I taught students about great stories and poems." Messi was impressed. "So why are you here alone on a rainy night?" he asked. Isabel sighed and looked at her book. "My husband, Roberto, was a history teacher. We met at school. But one day he started forgetting things, first small things, then big things. He had Alzheimer's disease." Messi's heart felt heavy. He had heard of that illness before. It made people forget their past, even their loved ones. "We sold everything we had for his treatment," Isabel continued. "Our house, our savings, everything." Messi listened in silence. "For 6 years I fought for him," Isabel said. "But in the end he passed away." She smiled sadly. "But you know the last thing he forgot?" She pointed to the book. "The poems of Martin Fierro. We used to read them together every night." Messi was deeply touched. He thought about his own family and how much they had sacrificed for him. "And now?" Messi asked softly. Isabel sighed. "Now I visit libraries. I read books to remember. But pensions don't pay enough. Life is hard." Just then the restaurant owner returned. He placed a bottle of Malbec wine on the table. "This is a gift," he said kindly before walking away. Isabel took a bite of her steak and smiled. "You know," she said, "when I saw you stop your car, I thought of my students." Messi raised an eyebrow. "Your students?" "I always told them," Isabel said, "that true greatness is when you stop and see others. And you did that tonight." Messi stirred his mate, thinking about her words. "My grandmother used to say something similar," he said. Then he asked, "Have you thought about teaching again?" Isabel's eyes brightened. "Every day," she said. "But schools don't hire old teachers like me anymore. And the libraries I used to visit." "What happened to them?" Messi asked. "They closed," Isabel said sadly. "No money to keep them open." Messi sat in deep thought. He looked at Isabel and saw a strong woman. What if we could change that? He whispered to himself. A few days later, Messi met Isabel again at a famous cafe called Las Violetas. The place was warm and filled with the smell of fresh croissants. Messi had been thinking a lot about how to help her. As they sat down, Messi pulled out an envelope from his jacket. Isabel immediately shook her head. No, young man. Don't even think about it. Messi blinked. But I didn't come here for charity, Isabel said firmly. I came because you said you had an idea. Messi put the envelope away. He felt like a little boy being told off by his mother. Sorry, Isabel, he said. I just thought. You thought money would fix everything, she said gently. Messi nodded. Then what do you need? He asked. Isabel smiled. I miss seeing children's eyes light up when they hear a new story. I miss the smell of books. I miss the quiet of a library full of people reading. Messi's eyes sparkled. And what if we could bring that back? That night, Messi made a promise to himself. He wouldn't just help Isabel. He would help every child who had lost their library. A few months later, something amazing happened. A new library opened in Buenos Aires. Inside, books lined the shelves and children sat on soft cushions reading stories. And at the front of the library, sitting at a big wooden desk, was Isabel Rodriguez, teaching again. She looked up and smiled as Lionel Messi walked in. Welcome, she said. We have a lot of stories to share. And from that rainy night in Puerto Madero, something beautiful had begun. Messi leaned forward. Bring back what? Everything. The library, the classes, the community. Dona Isabel stirred her coffee. Libraries are closing, Leo. The one in my neighborhood was the last one left. But what if we had our own library? Messi let the idea sit in the air. Our own? For a moment, Dona Isabel's eyes shined. But then they became sad again. That's crazy. Who would come to a library run by an old woman with no home? Messi smiled. The same people who learned from you for 30 years. The same kids you helped love books. The same woman who never let go of her books, even when she lost everything else. The cafe was quiet. The only sounds were cups clinking and people chatting in the distance. Sunlight came through the colorful windows, making their table glow. I have an idea, Messi said. But I need you to trust me, not as Messi the football player, but as Leo the kid who learned that big dreams start with a small step. Dona Isabel looked at him carefully. She wasn't looking at the famous Messi. She was looking at the real Leo. You know what I used to tell my students? She asked, taking a bite of her croissant. Books are like football. It doesn't matter where you come from. If you love it, you can go far. Messi held his breath. Then tell me your idea, kid. But let's be clear. I don't want charity. I want dignity. Messi smiled and took out his phone. I need to make a call. There are some people from my foundation who need to meet you. Leo. What a surprise, said Rosa Almada, Messi's old teacher, as he walked into school number 66 General Las Heras in Rosario. Kids were kicking a football against the wall, just like in Messi's memories. I need your advice, ma'am, Messi said, calling her Sino like all Argentine kids do with their teachers. Do you have a minute? Inside the teacher's lounge, the wall still had old maps and students' drawings. Rosa poured some tea and listened to Messi's story about Dona Isabel. You know what's the saddest part? Rosa sighed. Your Dona Isabel isn't the only one. Last month, the library in the Tablada neighborhood closed. 30 years of books, packed in boxes. Messi sat up straight. The Tablada library? The one near Newell's Stadium? The same one. A beautiful place, but abandoned now. Messi's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mateo, the person helping him. It had all the information Messi had asked for. His eyes lit up. Rosa, does the city still have a program to save old buildings? Yes, but there's no money for it. We don't need city money, Messi said, dialing a number. We need people like Dona Isabel. What are you thinking, Leo? Messi smiled. Something my dad always says, sometimes you have to go back to the beginning to find the way. Messi and Rosa walked toward the old Tablada library. Messi remembered the afternoons he spent there, reading sports magazines and dreaming of becoming a footballer. The building was old, but it still looked grand. Leo, look, Rosa pointed to a faded sign. Popular Library Juan Jose Castelli. Founded in 1943. Popular? Messi asked. That's what community libraries in Argentina are called. Neighbors build them and keep them running. Or at least they used to. Messi took out some keys. My foundation bought this building 3 months ago. We were going to make it a sports center, but... He unlocked the door. The smell of old books and wood filled the air. Tall, empty bookshelves lined the walls. Sunlight streamed in through dusty windows. This place, Rosa whispered. With some work, it could be the first of many, Messi said, snapping a photo. Will you help me convince Dona Isabel? Convince her of what? Rosa asked, but she was already smiling. That her dream of a library isn't just possible, it already has a home. Outside, kids played football. Their voices mixed with the echo of Messi and Rosa's footsteps in the empty library. Messi stopped in front of a wall where old words were still clear. I have always imagined that paradise will be some kind of library. Jorge Luis Borges. Rosa, do you believe in signs? Messi asked, smiling. The Foundation's meeting room in San Telmo was as serious as a World Cup final. Messi sat beside Dona Isabel, facing the board members. Mateo showed pictures of the Tablada library on a big screen. With all due respect, Leo Ruiz, the finance director, said, a library doesn't make money. The sports center was already approved. Make money? Dona Isabel said, her voice strong. How much is it worth for a child to find their first book? How much does it cost to give dignity to teachers who have retired? The room went quiet. Only the sound of coffee cups touching the table was heard. Messi placed some papers on the table. The Tablada library won't just be a place for books, he explained. It will be a cultural center where retired teachers like Dona Isabel can teach again. A place where costs will be too high, Ruiz interrupted. And hiring old people could bring legal problems. They wouldn't be employees, Mateo jumped in. I checked. They can be volunteers with stipends. It's legal. And the media? Asked Fernandez, the PR director. If this fails? If it fails? Messi leaned forward. And what if it succeeds? What if we create something new, something other foundations can copy? Ruiz took off his glasses. Your heart is in the right place, but... No buts. Dona Isabel stood up, filling the room with her presence. I taught for 40 years. Books opened doors to new worlds. When my husband got sick, I lost everything. Do you know what kept me going? The stories I shared with my students. She pulled out an old notebook. These are messages from my former students, doctors, engineers, even a National Literature Award winner. They all started in a public library. Messi took the notebook and read it aloud. Dear Sino Isabel, today I defended my doctoral thesis. It all began the day you showed me The Little Prince. Numbers, Ruiz said. We need numbers. Here are your numbers. Mateo showed another document. Costs, volunteer programs, partnerships with publishers. Everything. And the sports center? Someone asked. We can have both, Messi said. A place where sports and books come together. Where kids can dream of being footballers while also discovering the magic of reading. Fernandez's phone buzzed. His face changed. We have a problem. Someone told the press about this project. Reporters are downstairs. Problem? Dona Isabel smiled. I have an idea. Let's go talk to them. Let them see what we're doing. Messi looked at her with admiration. This woman, who had lost everything but her dignity, was teaching everyone a lesson. Well? Messi asked the board. Do we take a chance and do something different? Ruiz looked at the papers again. He sighed. With one condition, we start with Tablada as a test. If it works, it will work, Messi and Dona Isabel said at the same time. The community hall in Palermo, Soho was full of people. Messi stood next to Dona Isabel, watching as more and more neighbors arrived. Old teachers, shop owners, and families. They had all come because of the flyers inviting them to a big meeting. Are you nervous? Messi asked softly. After 50 years of teaching? Never, she said, but she held her folder tightly. One by one, people offered to help. Some had books to donate, others could help with printing or fixing things. A shy teenager raised her hand. My dad is an electrician, and I know a little about computers. Maybe we can set up a computer room? Dona Isabel's eyes filled with tears. She stood up and took a deep breath. When I lost my house, I thought I lost everything. But now, standing here, I understand something. A home is not just walls. It's the people inside that make it special. Messi listened quietly, remembering something his father once told him. Football can make you famous, but what you do with that fame is what really matters. I have an idea, said a retired literature teacher. While we fix the library, we can start classes here in the community hall. There's no need to wait. And on Saturdays, said Don Ricardo, you can use the patio at my bakery. People used to read the newspaper there, now they can read books. The meeting went on until late at night. When the last person left, Messi and Dona Isabel sat down, looking at the list of volunteers and donations. You know what the best part of this is? She asked. We didn't have to beg anyone to help. The community was always here, just waiting for a chance to do something good. Messi smiled. Like you always say in your classes, books are like football. They bring people together. The sun was rising over the neighborhood when the first truck arrived. Don Manuel's children jumped out, carrying buckets, brushes, and ladders. From Don Ricardo's bakery, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Be careful with those books, Dona Isabel called out. They are treasures, not just boxes. Messi, wearing jeans and an old t-shirt, helped carry furniture with the other volunteers. There were no photographers, no reporters, just neighbors working together. Look what I found. Sophia shouted from the back of the main hall. Everyone gathered around. She had discovered a bronze plaque hidden under dust. Read. Popular Library Juan Jose Castelli, inaugurated by Eva Perón, 1947. This is history, Dona Isabel whispered, touching the letters. The work was going well when Mateo came running. Leo, we have a problem. The architects found something in the basement, old papers that are very important. It could slow down the repairs. Messi and Dona Isabel hurried downstairs. In the basement, among crates and yellowed pages, they found something amazing, the building's original blueprints. Look at these notes, Dona Isabel said excitedly. The first librarians wrote down every book borrowed, every child who came to read. This library was the heart of the neighborhood. And it will be again, Messi said, taking out his phone. Mateo, call the Cultural Heritage Office. We won't ignore history, we'll protect it. Above, the work continued. The teenage volunteer set up donated computers while her father fixed the electrical system. On the patio, Don Manuel set up a barbecue for the workers. Come look at this, one of the builders shouted. He had removed an old panel from the wall. Behind it was a hidden painting, a mural of children reading under a tree. The colors were still bright, even after so many years. It's like the building itself is telling us its story, Dona Isabel said. As the sun went down, Sophia gathered everyone inside. I found something else, she said, holding a thick old book. It was a register of all the librarians who had worked there since 1947. Dona Isabel, can I add your name? The room went silent. With shaky hands, Dona Isabel took the pen and wrote her name. She was now part of the library's history. Hey Leo, Don Manuel called from the grill. You know what this place needs? A football section so kids can read about their favorite players. Messi smiled. I already thought of that. My foundation will donate a full collection of sports magazines, but on one condition. What condition? The neighbors asked. To take home a football magazine, they have to read a story first. The day was ending, but the real change was just beginning. Among the dust and ladders, a community was rebuilding its past and creating a better future. On the morning of the grand opening, Dona Isabel carefully adjusted the books on the newly restored shelves. The library's Art Deco walls shone under the morning sun. The journalists are outside, Mateo said. But something is different. Different how? Messi asked, hanging the last painting in the reading room. They're not here for you, Leo. They're here for her. Outside, a crowd had gathered, but not football fans. These were former students of Dona Isabel. Some had gray hair, others held their children's hands. They had traveled from all over the country when they heard the library was reopening. Senora Isabel. A man in a suit called out, pushing through the crowd. Do you remember me? Manuel Fernandez, 1985, third row by the window. Julito, she gasped. The one who wrote poems in math class. And now I'm the director of the National Library, he said, smiling. He held up an envelope. I brought something for you. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a younger Dona Isabel standing in a school library with her students. In the front, young Manuel held a Borges book. I kept this picture all these years, Manuel said, because that day changed my life. It was the day you told me books could be my future. The journalists, expecting a story about Messi, had found something even more special. The story of a teacher who never stopped teaching, even when she had no classroom. They met students who had grown up to be writers, editors, professors, all thanks to her love for books. Dona Isabel, Messi said softly, it's time to cut the ribbon. She shook her head. No, Leo. This moment belongs to them. One by one, her former students stepped forward, each cutting a piece of the ribbon. With each cut, they shared a memory, a thank you, a smile. You know what's the most beautiful thing? Dona Isabel said, watching the last piece of ribbon fall. This is not just a place to read. It's a place where old dreams meet new ones. Just then, a group of neighborhood children peeked through the doorway, eyes wide as they looked at the shelves full of books. "Can we come in?" a little girl asked shyly. "The library belongs to you," Donna Isabel said with a warm smile. She held out her hand. "Come, I'll show you where we keep the adventure stories." Messi stood in a corner, trying to stay quiet. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to be noticed. This moment was for Donna Isabel. "Do you know something?" Matteo whispered. "Everyone is talking about this on the internet, but not about football. They're talking about school, second chances, and respect." "Perfect," Messi smiled. "Because that was always the real story." A big surprise. Matteo ran into the library looking excited. "Did you see the news?" he asked. Donna Isabel looked up from the book she was reading to a group of children. Matteo held up his tablet. The big headline said, "Javier Suarez starts a similar library in Córdoba." And he wasn't the only one. In the past few weeks, many famous people in Argentina wanted to do the same thing as the Tablada Library. "But that's not all," Matteo said. "The Minister of Education wants to meet us. He's in the car, almost here." "What? And look at me. My apron is covered in chalk," Donna Isabel said. Messi walked into the room and smiled. "That apron," he said, "is like a gold medal. A library that changes lives." The minister didn't come alone. He brought important people who worked with books and schools from all over the country. They wanted to know how this little library had become the heart of the neighborhood. Donna Isabel showed them around. "The magic isn't in the building," she explained. "It's in the retired teachers who love teaching again. It's in the children who read their first books. It's the neighbors who give their time to help." The visitors looked around. In one corner, Sofia, a former school principal, was teaching teenagers about stories. Nearby, Don Manuel had a football corner, where he connected famous football moments to parts of the Little Prince book. The minister was amazed. "Did you know," he said, "the number of kids dropping out of school here has gone down by 23% in just 3 months. A doctor in the group added, "And fewer elderly people feel lonely or sad. This library is helping in so many ways." Messi listened quietly. He thought about that rainy night in Puerto Madero. Who would have thought that stopping the car would change so many lives? The minister turned to Donna Isabel. "We want to do this everywhere in Argentina. But we need someone to lead the project." Everyone looked at Donna Isabel. She was surprised. "But I'm just a retired teacher," she said. "No," said a voice at the door. It was Manuel Fernandez, the director of the National Library. "You are proof that teachers never really stop teaching." The minister nodded. "We already have people in Mar del Plata, Mendoza, and even Ushuaia who want to start their own libraries. We need someone who understands how to make this work." Donna Isabel looked around. She saw children reading, older people teaching, neighbors helping. Her eyes stopped on a photo of Eva Perón, who had opened the original library many years ago. She took a deep breath. "I will do it," she said. "But only if every library is more than just a place with books. It must be a home for people searching for where they belong." Messi smiled. "Like you found your place?" "No," she said. "Like we all found our place." 1 year later. Exactly 1 year after that rainy night, the library in Tablada was full of lights and people. They were celebrating its first anniversary. But Donna Isabel wasn't there. She was in Córdoba, opening the 10th library in the network. Messi called her on a video chat. She laughed. "Who would have thought I'd travel more than you?" she joked, cutting the ribbon with Javier Suarez. Everyone in Tablada watched the event on a big screen. They clapped and cheered. Don Manuel passed around empanadas. Sofia planned the next literature class. The football corner was full of kids reading football magazines and adventure books. Messi turned his camera to show a young woman standing next to him. "Do you remember Valeria? The girl who loved computers?" Messi asked. "How could I forget her?" Donna Isabel said. Valeria, now a university student, held up a small flash drive. "I created a way for all the libraries to connect online," she explained. "Now readers can share their experiences. Teachers can plan lessons together," Messi added. "And older people can tell their stories," Donna Isabel finished, her eyes full of happy tears. A celebration of hope. In Córdoba, the Minister of Education gave a speech. "Today we celebrate more than just buildings with books," he said. "We celebrate a movement that is changing Argentina. The numbers prove it. In every place with a library from the Dignity and Letters program, school dropout rates go down, communities come together, and older people find new purpose." Messi watched quietly. This wasn't just his project anymore. It belonged to everyone, the teachers, the students, the communities. Dona Isabel smiled through the screen. Do you know what's the best part? She asked. That every library has its own story, Messi answered. Yes. In Mar del Plata, retired fishermen teach about the sea. In Mendoza, winemakers share stories about wine while kids learn science. The celebration lasted all night. In every library, the lights stayed on, shining like stars in their neighborhoods. Before ending the video call, Messi called out, "Hey, Dona Isabel?" Yes. Do you remember what you told me that night at the bus stop? Are those books like football? No, the other thing. That real greatness is stopping to see others. Dona Isabel smiled. She looked around, at the books, the students, the teachers, the dreams that had come true. And look at that, she said. In the end, we all stopped at the Tablada library. A little boy raised his hand. Can I read something? It was from the guest book, written on the very first day the library opened. Some say miracles don't exist. But when people find dignity, when dreams find readers, and when a community finds its heart, what else can we call it but a miracle? If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.